Reborn to the day my fiancé skipped the imperial exam for my half-sister's birthday. This time, I didn't stop him. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. At 3/4 past the hour of the ox, the biting wind carried ice shards that cut straight into people's necks. In front of the dragon gate at the examination hall, hundreds of sky lanterns illuminated the blue stone pavement as brightly as daylight. I stood beside the carriage, watching the long line of examinees stretching out before me. The soldiers in charge of the body searches were stripping the scholars of their outer robes one by one, undoing their hair buns, and even carefully inspecting the soles of their shoes. From ahead, I could faintly hear the examiner's stern reprimands, mixed with the suppressed coughs of the scholars and the cold wind. Menghishu stood beside me, clutching his purple bamboo examination basket so tightly that it creaked. He was wearing the moon-white silk cocoon-lined jacket I had spent 3 months sewing by hand, yet his face showed not a trace of the spirited confidence one might expect from someone about to take the spring imperial examinations. Instead, it betrayed a faint, barely concealed sense of restlessness and fear. Changning, the examination rooms here are less than 6 feet wide. We have to eat, drink, and relieve ourselves all in the same space. It's hard enough just to turn around. And we have to endure this for 9 days and 6 nights straight. Menghishu furrowed his brow deeply as his gaze swept over the candidates, who were clad in thin garments and had turned blue from the cold. His tone betrayed an undisguised sense of disgust. After all, I am the legitimate son of the Marquis of Jing'an's household. Even if I didn't try to squeeze through this narrow gate, Father has long said that, at worst, I could always use my connections at the Ministry of Rights to secure a position through hereditary privilege. Why should I subject myself to such filthy suffering here? I watched him quietly, and a glimmer of icy clarity dawned in my heart. This is my fiancé, the second son of the Marquis of Jing'an, a man renowned throughout the capital as a literary genius. While he usually spends his days at poetry gatherings reciting verses about the moon and the breeze, priding himself on his lofty ideals, the moment he stands before the gates of the Imperial Examination Hall, where true talent is put to the test and candidates are pushed to their limits, his innate cowardice and pampered nature are laid bare. He thought that an official appointed by hereditary privilege was just another court official, but he didn't realize that as the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Revenue, I had been accustomed to the intrigues of the bureaucracy since childhood. In the imperial court, only those who pass the imperial examination can enter the Hanlin Academy, and only those in the Hanlin Academy can enter the cabinet. An official who relies on his father's hereditary privilege to coast through life has no place of dignity in the eyes of the upright scholars or those in positions of real power. He is doomed to spend his entire life walking on eggshells, constantly having to read others' faces. Precisely because I fully understood what was at stake, I strictly urged him to study hard for the exams on a daily basis, even cutting him off from his drinking parties and poetry gatherings. This made him see me as rigid, utilitarian, and detestable, so he turned instead to my younger half-sister, Shui Shiwei, who was always ready to lend a helping hand and knew nothing but romance and idle pleasures. According to Shui Shiwei, even if he failed the imperial examinations, he would still be a noble young master of the Bo family capable of holding his head high. As a hereditary official, he could still wear gold and silver, so why subject himself to such suffering? Your Highness! Second young master! A piercing scream interrupted my train of thought. Shui Shiwei's personal maid, Dong Xue, pushed her way through the crowd. Her hair was disheveled as she knelt with a thud at Menghishu's feet, weeping as if pear blossoms were drenched in rain. Second young master, please hurry back and check on my young mistress. Today is her birthday. She already caught a chill, and in the middle of the night, her old ailment flared up. The pain in her chest was so severe she couldn't catch her breath, yet she refused to take any medicine, muttering your name over and over. The doctor said that if her heart remains so distressed before dawn, I'm afraid it won't end well. As soon as he said that, several test takers standing in line nearby turned to look at him. I looked at Menghishu with a cold gaze. If he were truly worried and heartbroken, his first reaction should have been to ask about her condition. But I clearly saw that when Menghishu heard Dongshua's words, a fleeting glimmer of secret relief flashed across his eyes that had been wandering uneasily out of fear of the bitter cold in the prison cell. He came up with the perfect excuse, one that not only allowed him to legitimately avoid 9 days and 6 nights of hellish entrance exams, but also enabled him to portray himself as a man of deep affection and unwavering loyalty, unconcerned with fame and fortune. In a past life, at this very hour, the scene was exactly the same. Back then, in order to preserve the reputation of the marriage alliance between our two families, and to prevent him from becoming a laughingstock in the capital, I, overcome by anger and frustration, stood firmly in his path. I tugged at his sleeve and explained to him in excruciating detail that withdrawing from the imperial examinations was a grave crime amounting to contempt for the court. I even set aside the dignity of a noblewoman and, with tears in my eyes, pleaded with him at the gate of the examination hall to prioritize the greater good. Under pressure from the officials patrolling the examination grounds, he finally entered the Dragon Gate with a menacing look on his face, carrying his examination basket, and to everyone's surprise, his name actually appeared on the list of successful candidates. But what was the result? He blamed me entirely for failing to be there for Shui Shiwei on her birthday, an oversight that led to her condition worsening and her developing a chronic cold. After our marriage, he took Shui Shiwei as a co-wife under the pretext of gratitude, and the two of them worked in tandem to portray me as a vicious woman who cared nothing for the lives of her own siblings in pursuit of worldly gain. Using the generous dowry left by my mother, they cultivated connections outside the household and rose through the ranks step by step, yet within the mansion, they gradually stripped me of all power. Ultimately, they locked me away in a derelict courtyard without a single piece of charcoal, leaving me to freeze and starve to death. Having been given a second chance at life, as I watched Dong Shui still banging her head on the ground and Meng Heshu putting on an act of deep anguish with his eyes bulging in fury, I found it all utterly ridiculous. Changning! Meng Heshu suddenly turned to look at me, his eyes slightly reddened, his tone filled with righteous resolve, as if he were certain I would try to stop him just as I always did. The imperial examinations are held only once every 3 years, but do you realize I have only one life? I won't take the exam today. He stared intently at my face, as if he already had a whole string of accusations ready, accusing me of being cold-hearted and ruthless and of caring only about fame and fortune, just waiting for me to speak up so he could seize the opportunity to make a big deal out of it. I stood in the crisp morning breeze. Instead of stepping forward to grab his sleeve, as he had expected, I took half a step back, completely clearing the path to the carriage. The second young master speaks most wisely. I lowered my eyes slightly, my voice gentle and calm, even tinged with a touch of understanding compassion. Fame and fortune are but external things. How can they compare to the importance of a human life? Since Jiwei's illness has become so critical, if you were to enter the examination hall now, those 9 days and 6 nights would surely feel like sitting on pins and needles, and you wouldn't be able to write anything worthwhile. That being the case, you should hurry back to see her. Don't leave yourself with any regrets. Meng Heshu clearly hadn't expected me to react that way. You're really not going to stop me? He asked dryly, his hand unconsciously clenching the handle of the exam basket. Why are you stopping me? I looked up and met his gaze. My voice wasn't loud, but it was just loud enough for the scholars and patrol officials pricking up their ears nearby to hear every word clearly. The second young master would even forego the spring imperial examinations for his younger half-sister's birthday. Changning can only admire such a magnanimous spirit, one that defies worldly conventions and values loyalty and affection above all else. Go on now. Don't keep Jiwei waiting. With me holding him in such high regard, Meng Heshu's ridiculous sense of pride swelled instantly. On top of that, with scholars around him already beginning to point and whisper, he knew that if he backed out now and went to stand in line, he would not only lose the substance of his deep devotion but also earn a reputation for being a coward who valued his own life above all else. Changning, you really are a reasonable person. Meng Heshu took a deep breath, as if he had finally convinced himself. To demonstrate his resolve, he abruptly slammed the purple bamboo examination basket he was holding onto the ground. There was a dull thud. A fine piece of huizhou ink broke into 2 pieces. The goat hair brush I had ground by hand rolled off the blue stone slab, and the pure white xian paper scattered across the floor, stained with mud and water. This measly imperial examination, I'd rather not take it. Even if I don't go down this path, I am Meng Heshu, will still be able to make a name for myself in the capital through my own abilities. He blurted out this outrageous remark, didn't even glance at what had fallen to the ground, flicked his sleeve, and hurriedly climbed into the Earl's carriage with the maidservant, urging the coachman to drive off into the distance. For a moment, there was complete silence in front of the examination hall. The chief examiner in charge of roll call and signatures cast a cold glance at the receding carriage, then picked up his brush and drew a glaring red X over the 3 characters Meng Heshu on the roster. Beside him, a young official dressed in a crimson robe was flipping through a file. Upon hearing the commotion, he did not look up, but merely snorted derisively. I looked at the mess on the floor, and a very faint smile finally played on the corners of my mouth. You have shown contempt for the imperial examinations, treating the imperial court's grand ceremony for selecting officials as a child's game, and even publicly declared your disdain for the examination system. Meng Heshu, you have completely cut yourself off from any legitimate path to a career in public service for the rest of your life. My personal maid, Rindong, was trembling with rage. Her eyes were red-rimmed as she whispered, "Miss. How could the second young master do this for the second young lady? He's your fiancé, after all. By leaving so recklessly today, what will become of your reputation? If word of this gets out, who knows what people will say about our household? What's the rush?" I turned around, stepped onto the carriage using the footstool, and climbed aboard with a calm, unhurried air. Since he's so deeply in love that he's even willing to give up his future, I suppose I should go all the way in supporting them. Huang Ding used a copper poker to stir the charcoal brazier at her feet and looked at me with some concern. "Miss, the second young master abandoned the exam in front of everyone. If word of this reaches the manor, the master will certainly be furious. If we return just like this, might we be implicated and punished?" I picked up the cup of lukewarm tea from the small table and took a sip, using the wispy steam to hide the mockery in my eyes. Now that I've been given a second chance at life, I've come to realize that you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Since he likes to wallow in the mud, I might as well go with the flow and just stomp him into the ground. It won't come back to haunt us. I set down my teacup, my voice steady and without the slightest fluctuation. Refusing to take the imperial examinations and showing contempt for the grand ceremony of selecting officials, these are capital offenses punishable by the confiscation of one's property and expulsion from office. My father is the Minister of Revenue, and he values his official reputation above all else. Now that someone is trampling the Shui family's reputation as a model of integrity into the mud, it's not me who should be worried, it's the one who started this whole mess. It was just beginning to get light out when the carriage pulled up at the side gate of the Minister of Right's residence. Instead of returning to my own courtyard, I took Honeysuckle straight to the front hall. At this hour, my father, Shui Shilin, must surely have already risen and be preparing for the morning court session. As soon as I stepped into the main hall, I saw my father, dressed in ceremonial robes adorned with a crimson crane emblem, adjusting his cuffs. Standing beside him, attending to him, was Shui Shiwei's biological mother, concubine Liu, who was currently the most favored woman in the household. She was diligently smoothing the jade sash around my father's waist, a gentle, alluring smile playing on her face. "Chongning? Didn't you go to see he Shu off to the exam hall? How come you're back so soon?" My father looked up and saw me, furrowing his brow slightly. Without saying a word, I took 2 steps forward and knelt straight down on the blue brick floor. "Please forgive me, father. Your daughter is inadequate. I was unable to dissuade the second young master." I bowed my head slightly, my voice carrying just the right touch of alarm and exhaustion. "The second young master. He has withdrawn from the examination." With a loud thud, my father slammed the jade-handled folding fan in his hand down hard on the small table, causing a fine blue and white porcelain cup to fall to the floor and shatter into pieces. "What did you say?" My father jumped to his feet. His normally dignified face suddenly turned pale, and his hand was trembling slightly as he pointed at me. The imperial examinations, 9 years of hard study, and he actually dared to run away at the last minute? Has the house of the Marquis of Jing'an lost its mind? With so many eyes watching at the entrance to the examination hall, didn't the officials patrolling the grounds stop him? I looked up and gazed clearly at my father. The official in charge of signing and certifying the documents has already marked the second young master's name with a red X in red ink on the register. Those words hit him like a sledgehammer, causing him to stagger. Everyone in the imperial court knew that a red cross on the roster meant the person had been blacklisted by the Ministry of Rights. Not only would he never again have a chance to take the imperial examinations in this lifetime, but even if he later sought to secure a position through family connections, the Ministry of Personnel would see this black mark when reviewing his record. Meng Hishu's political career had already been completely ruined before dawn. Concubine Lu clearly didn't grasp the political implications at stake. She simply thought it was a childish quarrel. She hurried forward to soothe her father's anger, interjecting in a sweet, girlish voice, "Please calm down, master. The second young master must be feeling unwell, that's why he missed the event. And the eldest young lady really ought to have done better, since she went to see him off for the exams. Why didn't she try harder to persuade him? After all, the second young master is such a delicate young man. How could he possibly endure the hardships of the examination hall? You may not be aware of this, concubine Lu, but the second young master did not leave because he was feeling unwell." I looked at concubine Lu. My tone was gentle, yet every word cut like a poison-tipped dagger. "Someone sent word from second younger sister's side, saying she is gravely ill and wishes to see him one last time." Concubine Lu was taken aback, and the smile on her face froze instantly. What nonsense are you talking about? Weir was perfectly fine yesterday." I ignored her and looked straight into my father's eyes, which were practically shooting fire, my tone so steady it bordered on cold. While we were waiting in line for the body search at the examination hall, Dongxue, the maidservant from my second younger sister's quarters, suddenly rushed over, crying out that today was my second younger sister's birthday. She said my second younger sister's chronic illness had flared up in the middle of the night, and the pain in her chest was so severe she couldn't catch her breath. If she doesn't see the second young master before dawn, I'm afraid she won't live much longer. I paused for a moment, then repeated Meng Hishu's outrageous words word for word. Upon hearing this, the second young master smashed his exam basket in front of everyone and shouted, "The imperial examinations are held only once every 3 years, but Jiwei has only one life. As for this trivial exam hall, I'd rather not enter it." He then got into his carriage and hurried straight back to our mansion. A deathly silence fell over the main hall. In an instant, all the color drained from my father's face, replaced by a deathly pallor born of extreme rage. As a seasoned veteran who had spent 20 years navigating the political arena, how could he fail to grasp the crux of the matter? An unmarried concubine's daughter, pretending to be ill in the middle of the night, sent her maid to intercept her future brother-in-law as he was on his way to the exam hall. A young master of the Bo family, already betrothed, publicly defied the imperial talent selection ceremony for the sake of a concubine's daughter, and, disregarding the strict gender boundaries, even barged into the inner courtyard where unmarried women resided at dawn. Once word of this gets out, not to mention that Meng Hishu's future will be utterly ruined, the reputation of the entire Shui family's daughter, her father's honor, and even his image as an upright official known for strict family discipline in the imperial court, all of it will be dragged through the mud by these two shameless creatures, leaving a stench that will last for all eternity. The censoriate's memorials of impeachment will flood the desk of the Minister of Revenue as early as tomorrow. "You worthless slut!" Father lashed out with a heavy slap, slapping concubine Lu hard across the face. Concubine Lu let out a blood-curdling scream as she was struck and fell to the ground. A trickle of blood instantly seeped from the corner of her mouth, and the gold hairpin in her bun shattered into pieces. Clutching her face, she stared in utter terror at her enraged father, too frightened even to utter a word of supplication. "What a fine daughter you've raised. She has no sense of shame. She's bringing disgrace upon our family." The father was so enraged that his whole body was trembling. He kicked over the Wangwali wood chair next to him. "If I don't beat this shameless little monster to death today, I might as well give up my position as minister." With that, my father yanked the black official cap off his head and tossed it onto the table. Without even bothering to change out of his court robes, he stormed out the door and strode straight toward the west wing of the compound. I slowly stood up from the ground, supported by Rindu. I brushed the fine dust off the hem of my skirt and followed them at a leisurely pace. The west courtyard was Shui Jiwei's residence. By now, it was already broad daylight, yet there wasn't even a maid standing guard at the gate. My father kicked the gate open and stormed inside, radiating a murderous aura. I followed my father into the courtyard, and before we even reached the main hall, I heard a soft, sweet, and coquettish laugh coming from the window covered with gauze. It didn't sound at all like someone who was on the verge of death. That girlish laughter was clear and melodious, tinged with a delicate fragility and coy petulance reminiscent of a sickly beauty. In the cold, quiet inner courtyard of the minister's residence that early morning, it sounded particularly jarring. My father's already ashen face instantly turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. Without the slightest hesitation, he took a step forward and violently kicked the half-open lattice door. With a loud bang, the carved wooden door slammed against the wall, causing it to shake violently. The cloying atmosphere in the room was instantly shattered by the loud crash. I cast a cold glance over and saw Shui Shiwei standing before the four-poster bed, wearing nothing but a semi-transparent moon-white silk nightgown, her black hair half-pinned up, leaning delicately and bonelessly against a bolster. As for Meng Hishu, the second son of the Marquis of Jing'an, who should have been wielding his brush in the examination hall, he was now seated at the bedside, holding a bowl of medicinal soup still steaming. He even scooped up a spoonful and, with a look of deep tenderness, brought it to Shui Shiwei's lips. A man and a woman, alone together in a private room, half-dressed, and the man is the woman's future brother-in-law. If word of this got out, there would be no need to wait for a report from the censorate. The Shui family's ancestors' coffins wouldn't even be able to contain the commotion. Ah! Shui Shiwei let out a startled scream, hurriedly pulled the blanket over her head, and cowered in the corner of the bed like a frightened quail. Meng Hishu's hand trembled, and the entire bowl of medicinal soup spilled onto the precious Persian rug. He sprang to his feet. A flicker of panic crossed his face, which had previously been full of tenderness, but when he realized it was his father and me, that panic was quickly replaced by a forced, composed air of arrogance. "Uncle." Meng Hishu forced a slight bow, his usual composure slightly shaken. "Why have you come at a time like this? Wei had a heart attack last night and nearly—" "Shut up." My father's forehead bulged with veins as he pointed a finger at Meng Hishu's nose and unleashed a torrent of abuse. "What kind of person are you, daring to call her by her given name? When did it ever become your place, as an outsider, to enter the inner chambers to visit a sick daughter of the Shui family? Is that what the rules of the Marquis of Jing'an's household teach you, how to break into the Yu family's inner courtyard at night and engage in secret trysts with an unmarried concubine's daughter?" Meng Hishu's face stiffened as he was berated, and that haughty temperament typical of a young man from a distinguished family immediately surfaced. His gaze swept past his father and fixed on me with a look full of reproach. "Please calm down, uncle. This has nothing to do with Wei. I came here of my own accord." Meng Hishu took a deep breath, his tone surprisingly tinged with a sense of righteous indignation. "Wei's illness was life-threatening. If I hadn't arrived in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Changning was only concerned with forcing me to pursue fame and fortune. She didn't care at all about Wei's life or death. I simply couldn't bear to see Wei suffer, so that's why." "You can't bear to see her suffer, so you've even disregarded the imperial examinations?" My father laughed bitterly in his rage, a smile even more hideous than tears. "Meng Hishu, what do you take the imperial examinations for? Do you think there's some wine drinking and poetry gathering in your family's backyard, where you can come and go as you please? Do you realize that with that single stroke of the red brush drawing a cross on the gate of the examination hall this morning, your entire political career is utterly ruined?" Upon hearing this, a hint of disdain flashed across Meng Hishu's eyes. In my previous life, it was precisely because I feared he might harbor such naive notions that I tried so earnestly to dissuade him. Now that no one is there to advise him, he has truly come to mistake that ignorance for confidence. "So be it." Meng Hishu flung his sleeve aside and declared haughtily, "I've never had the patience to jostle my way across that narrow bridge. The examination hall is drafty and leaky. You can't even get a cup of hot tea there. How can anyone endure such misery? My father has long promised me that even if I fail the exams, I can still secure a position through the Ministry of Rights using my family's hereditary privilege." "Uncle, a hereditary official is still an imperial appointee. With the prestige of your family's estate, given time, I'll still rise to the top of the bureaucracy. Why on earth are you getting so angry?" Hidden under the covers, Shui Shiwei heard these words and quietly peeked out, her gaze toward Meng Hishu brimming with admiration and emotion. In the eyes of this concubine's daughter, who knew nothing but fighting over fabric and jewelry, a man who was willing to give up his future for her, and who would still be able to serve as a government official in the capital, was nothing short of a romantic hero straight out of a storybook. A lack of patronage? A meteoric rise? His father, though furious, actually calmed down. He stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at Meng Hishu as if he were a dead man, his voice so cold it could shatter ice. Do you really think that just because your old man is willing to sacrifice his dignity, the imperial court will obediently make room for you? Meng Hishu, you haven't even read the laws of the Great Qi properly, yet you dare to speak so brazenly here. My father took a step forward, his words ringing out with authority. When the Ministry of Personnel reviews officials appointed through hereditary privilege, it places the utmost importance on their background and character. By publicly refusing to take the examination at the entrance to the examination hall today, you have shown contempt for the imperial selection process and defied the authority of the sovereign and your father. That red cross in red ink is not a pass for the examination. It is irrefutable proof of your moral failings. Never mind a position at the Ministry of Rights, even for a 9th-rank clerk in the provinces. If the Minister of Personnel dares to approve your recommendation, I will personally file a formal complaint against him tomorrow in the Golden Hall, accusing him of forming factions and engaging in self-serving practices. The smug look on Meng Hishu's face froze instantly. Although he knew nothing about administrative affairs, he wasn't stupid. His father's ruthless analysis was like a basin of cold water laced with ice cubes, dousing the faint flame of his blind confidence and leaving him thoroughly disheartened. He opened his mouth, but found his throat parched. He couldn't bring himself to utter a single word in response. As for the prestige of our family's estate that you mentioned. Father let out a cold snort and mercilessly tore away his last shred of dignity. Your eldest brother is the heir apparent. He is the one who will inherit the title, and he is the one who will uphold the family's honor. You, as a second son, have ruined your own chances at the imperial examinations, and you've blocked your own path to hereditary privilege. What do you have left? You're nothing more than a good-for-nothing wastrel who'll eventually be sent away from the estate to eke out a meager existence on a few plots of land, waiting to die. Father, now that things have come to this, there's no point in scolding the second young master any further. I spoke slowly, my voice gentle yet precisely striking at the heart of the matter. The second young master and my second younger sister share a love as deep as the sea. They are even willing to risk the complete ruin of their reputations to meet in secret, which clearly shows the strength of his feelings. Although I am betrothed to the second young master, I cannot bring myself to be the villain who tears the lovebirds apart. Ignoring Meng Hishu's suddenly dilated pupils, I turned to my father and bowed deeply, speaking in a solemn tone. Since the second young master values love more than his career, our Shui family certainly cannot force this marriage upon him. I am willing to step aside and make way for my younger sister. I earnestly ask Father to offer this marriage to my second younger sister, so that they may have their lovely romance. Changning, what nonsense are you talking about? Meng Hishu was completely flustered. Upon hearing this, my father suddenly turned to look at me. The anger that had been in his eyes seasoned by years in public office, gradually faded, replaced by a look of profound contemplation. My father knew full well that if even the slightest detail of today's events were to leak out, the Shui family's reputation would be completely ruined. The only way out of this predicament was to confirm that Meng Hishu and Shui Shiwei had been betrothed long ago, thereby clearing my name entirely. Since Meng Hishu was already a good-for-nothing whose future was utterly ruined, it would be better to marry him off to a concubine's daughter and let him fend for himself at the Duke's mansion than to drag the legitimate daughter down with him. I lowered my head slightly, letting my father take me in. I knew he had already made up his mind. Sure enough, Father took a deep breath, turned to look at Shui Shiwei, whose face was ashen, and coldly uttered a single sentence. Since the second young master is willing to cast his future aside in pursuit of a woman's affection, this old man will grant your wish. The marriage contract exchanged between our two families all those years ago merely stated that we would form an alliance through marriage. It did not specify that it was for Changning. After court adjourns today, this old man will personally go to the gates of the Jing'an Marquis' mansion to formally transfer this marriage to the second young miss. Upon hearing this, Shui Jiwei, wrapped in her brocade quilt, suddenly stiffened. I distinctly saw a flash of uncontrollable ecstasy burst forth from her eyes, which had previously been brimming with terror. But Meng Hishu's reaction was as if he'd been struck by lightning. "Uncle! This absolutely cannot be." He sprang to his feet, his face ashen as he looked at his father, his voice betraying his uncontrollable panic. "My marriage to Changning was arranged by our ancestors, how can it be changed on a whim? Wei. After all, she is the daughter of a concubine. If she were to become the primary wife, my mother would certainly never agree." I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Look at that, this is his deep affection, for which he'll stop at nothing. What's the matter? Didn't you, second young master, just say a moment ago that you'd give up anything for your second younger sister? I fiddled with the red jade bead bracelet on my wrist, my voice soft and gentle, yet it struck him like a resounding slap across the face. Now that this extraordinary match has been presented right before you, are you actually turning your nose up at Jiwei's background? Shui Jiwei, who had been left sitting on the couch, was taken aback. She stared blankly at Meng Hishu, who was cowering as if trying to avoid her, and the wild joy in her eyes gradually gave way to disbelief and bewilderment. "Whether the Marquis of Jing'an's household agrees or not is not up to you," my father coldly interrupted him, his tone carrying the unquestionable authority of one long accustomed to power. "You have tarnished my daughter's reputation. If you do not accept this marriage, I will go and strike the drum of public petitions tomorrow and accuse you before the emperor of breaking into the inner chambers at night and driving the family of an imperial official to their deaths. At that point, our two families will be destroyed together, and I'll see just how well the Earl of Jing'an can protect a good-for-nothing like you who refuses to take the imperial examinations." "Someone!" My father barked, and immediately several rough-looking maidservants surged in from outside, each with a grim expression on her face. "Go and escort the second young master out of the minister's mansion. Seal off the west wing, without my permission, not even a flying insect is to be allowed to leave." Meng Hishu felt as if his backbone had been pulled out. He was half supported, half dragged out by two burly old women. When he reached the courtyard gate, he stumbled and nearly fell into a mud puddle. From start to finish, he didn't even dare to look back once at Shui Jiwei, the woman on the couch who had made him feel as deep as the sea. The commotion subsided, and all that remained in the room was Shui Jiwei's stifled, fearful sobbing. Her father cast a look of disgust her way, as if she were a foul-smelling corpse, then swept his sleeve and strode out of the room. With Rindong supporting me, I walked slowly behind my father as we left the western side courtyard. My father stopped in his tracks beneath the hand-painted gallery, turned around, and scrutinized me with an extremely complex and piercing gaze. He was a shrewd man who could turn the tides of power in the imperial court. With today's events unfolding so perfectly, they naturally did not escape his notice. "Changning, you retreated so readily today. Did you see through that beast's true nature long ago and deliberately refrain from intervening, luring this old man here to catch the thief and recover the stolen goods?" My father's voice was very low, yet it carried an all-knowing sense of oppression. I stopped in my tracks, calmly met my father's gaze, bent my knees, and bowed respectfully. "Father, please understand, your daughter is no prophet. I merely went to the entrance of the examination hall and heard the second young master's shocking remarks, and knew at once that this man was unworthy of trust." I kept my eyes cast down, my voice clear and resolute. Had I intervened at the time or covered for him, I might have saved face for the moment, but the reputation of the Shui family, a lineage of integrity spanning a century, would have been like a dagger hanging over our heads day after day. Rather than risk having our family assets confiscated and our clan wiped out by him in the future, it is better to act decisively now and cut out this rotten flesh. I know my methods were not entirely above board, but to preserve the Shui family's reputation, I had no choice but to take such a risky course of action. I ask Father to punish me as he sees fit. With these words, I did not deny that I was going with the flow, but I firmly anchored my motivation in preserving the family. To a minister of state who valued wealth and power above all else, a legitimate daughter who remained calm in the face of adversity and knew when to cut her losses was far more valuable than a pampered doll who knew nothing but to weep. Sure enough, the scrutinizing look in my father's eyes gradually faded, and the tension in his facial features softened somewhat. He reached out as if to support me and sighed, "You've been through a lot. To remain so composed in the face of such upheaval, you truly live up to being my Schwesterlin's eldest daughter. If this engagement is called off, so be it. In time, I will certainly find you another suitable match." "Master! Master!" Before my father could finish speaking, Shui Ping, the steward of the outer courtyard, hurried through the arched gate, jogging over with sweat pouring down his face. Without even pausing to pay his respects, he whispered urgently, "Master, the inside contact waiting outside the palace gates has sent back an urgent message. During this morning's court session, the censors from the censorate are likely to cause trouble." My father's eyebrow twitched sharply, and his gaze instantly turned sharp. "What's going on?" "It's just a candidate for the provincial examination who withdrew from the exam. Why would that be enough to alarm the censorate?" "It's not as simple as just skipping the exam." Shui Ping was so flustered he kept slapping his thigh. The second young master of the Meng family dropped his exam basket at the entrance to the examination hall and shouted something about Miss Jiwei's life is at stake. At the time, the area was packed with stewards and scholars sent by various mansions to accompany candidates to the exam. Word spread like wildfire, and now the entire outer city is abuzz with rumors, saying that the young master of the Jing'an Marquis mansion has disregarded even the principles of propriety and the laws of the land for the sake of Miss Jiwei from our minister's mansion. With such a scandalous incident, how could those censors at the censorate, who are always quick to report on rumors, pass up this golden opportunity to accuse you of failing to maintain strict discipline in your household? My father's expression darkened instantly, and he clenched the cuffs of his neatly pressed court robes so tightly they were almost crushed. In the world of officialdom, the greatest fear is not corruption, but this kind of scandalous stain. Once it sticks, it can never be washed away. "Go prepare the carriage." My father took a deep breath, forcing himself to suppress his raging anger, then turned to Shui Ping, his tone cold and resolute. "Tell the gatekeeper that I'm taking the day off from court today. Take the second daughter's birth chart and go straight to the Marquis of Jing'an's residence." Watching my father's rosewood carriage, bearing the emblem of the minister's mansion, race away, kicking up a cloud of fine dust from the blue stone pavers, I turned slowly, supported by Rindao, and walked back toward my own Shuanghua courtyard. In the early years, the ladies of the various mansions in the capital often whispered among themselves that the rules in the inner quarters of our minister's residence were somewhat unconventional. Whenever an incident arose, my father, as the head of the household, would always step in personally to handle it. Little did they know that ever since my mother's untimely death from illness 5 years ago, my father, out of deference to the reputation of my maternal family, the house of the Marquis of Pingjiang, and to preserve his own pristine reputation as a man of integrity, has yet to elevate a single concubine to the status of principal wife. With no matriarch at the helm of the household, even though concubine Lu was in favor, she had neither the standing nor the political savvy to handle such a scandalous affair involving an outsider. What's more, Meng Hishu's outburst at the entrance to the imperial examination hall had already brought this domestic scandal into the open before the imperial court. In his father's eyes, this was no longer a trivial matter of jealousy among young ladies in the inner quarters, but a life-or-death crisis concerning his official position and the honor and disgrace of the entire Shui family. At such a critical juncture, only he could step in personally and use decisive, thunderous measures to cut through the chaos. No one else could stabilize the situation on the brink of collapse. Just as I expected, father's visit to the Marquis of Jing'an's residence really hit them where it hurts. Before noon, father returned to the manor with a face as cold as ice. Without even changing out of his court robes, he immediately ordered that concubine Lu and Shui Jiwei be summoned to the main hall. I sat in a round armchair behind the screen, holding a cup of Luan Guopian tea, and listened quietly to the commotion outside. The marriage arrangements have already been changed. My father's voice was thick with exhaustion and coldness, without a single word of preamble. That old fox, the Marquis of Jing'an, the moment he heard that the censorate was going to indict him for failing to raise his son properly and undermining the order of the court, he was so terrified he didn't dare utter even a single no. He agreed on the spot to change the birth dates on the marriage contract to those of our second daughter. To quell this scandal before rumors could fully erupt, the Marquis of Jing'an's household proposed a swift resolution, setting the wedding date for the 9th day of next month. A series of rapid gasps could be heard from behind the screen. Concubine Lu fell to her knees with a thud, her voice brimming with uncontrollable ecstasy, and she even bowed her head to the ground several times in succession. "This humble servant thanks you, master, for your kindness. That second young lady can now rightfully become the principal wife of the Bo household, all thanks to your generosity, master." I gently skimmed the foam off the surface of my teacup, and a mocking, cold smile curled at the corners of my mouth. The legitimate wife? With their horizons confined by the few feet of the inner courtyard wall, that mother and daughter could indeed see nothing but the glamour of those four characters. Father paid no heed to concubine Lu's expressions of gratitude. He merely cut her off coldly in a tone reserved for fools. "Don't get your hopes up too soon." Although the Marquis of Jing'an has grudgingly agreed to this marriage, Meng Hishu's scandalous misdeeds have not only cut short his own political career but have also made the entire Marquis' household a laughingstock in the capital. The Baroness hates this matter with a passion and has made it clear the wedding may proceed, but there will be absolutely no grand celebration. No cumbersome formalities of the 3 letters and 6 rites, no pomp and circumstance of 8 10-li red dowry procession. On the 9th day of next month, a single small palanquin will be carried through the side gate of the Baron's estate, and that will be all. The side entrance? Shui Jiwei's voice, which had been full of joy just a moment ago, suddenly cracked, and she screamed in disbelief, her voice trembling. "Father! Since I am going to be his primary wife, how can I possibly enter through the side entrance? Wouldn't that be just as lowly as being a concubine? Meng Lang would never agree to let me suffer such humiliation." Meng Lang? He can't even look after himself in the Duke's mansion these days. He's been stripped of the right to even step outside the courtyard. Do you really expect him to stand up for you? My father slammed his fist down on the table so hard that the teacups clattered noisily. "Shui Jiwei, what do you think you've snatched up with all your scheming? A splendid match. What you've snatched up is a good-for-nothing whose future is ruined and who's been cast out by his own family. You begged for this marriage yourself, so even if it's a pit of fire ahead, you'll have to jump right in and take it like a good girl. From this day forward, until the day you're married off, if you dare take even half a step outside your room, I'll give you a dose of medicine, and the minister's household will consider you no longer our daughter." The hall instantly fell into a deathly silence, broken only by Shui Jiwei's stifled sobs, born of sheer terror. I set down my teacup and stepped slowly out from behind the screen. "Second sister, please don't cry." I walked up to Shui Jiwei and looked down at her pitiful, vulnerable face. My voice was gentle, yet each word cut like an icy blade. "The 9th day of next month is an exceptionally auspicious occasion. If you find the side gate too quiet, why not look forward to the festivities on that day? After all, the 9th day of the first month is not only the day of your grand wedding, but also an auspicious day when the results of the spring imperial examinations are announced and the top scholars are personally selected by the emperor." Shui Jiwei's sobbing stopped abruptly, and she looked at me with a bewildered expression, completely unable to grasp the deeper meaning of my words. And I had no desire to explain it further to her. Time flies like a white horse passing through a crevice. Before long, it was the early morning of the 9th day of the next month. The area in front of the Golden List outside the Imperial Examination Hall in the capital was already packed shoulder to shoulder with people, while in the back alley of the Marquis of Jing'an's mansion, a shabby little red wool palanquin was quietly being set down in front of a side gate that remained closed year-round. The bustling crowd on the long street and the dead silence in the alley behind the Marquis of Jing'an's mansion were separated by nothing more than a high wall covered in moss. I sat in the green-lacquered, flat-roofed carriage parked at the entrance to the alley, quietly gazing through the half-drawn Xiangfei bamboo curtain at that shabby little palanquin, which wasn't even fully adorned with wedding flowers. On this very day in my past life, I too had stood on this long street. Back then, Meng Hishu had passed the imperial examinations. Riding high on his horse through the streets, he was riding high on success, his horse's hooves pounding swiftly as blossoms from all over the city rained down upon his shoulders. Standing among the thronging crowd, I gazed at my radiant husband, fully convinced that this was the prelude to a century of harmony between the Shui and Meng families. Little did I know it marked the beginning of my life's tragedy. Now that I've been given a second chance at life, on the same 9th day of the first month, the same day the imperial examination results are announced, that fine steed that once belonged to the third-place winner has long since been replaced by this wretched little palanquin before me, one that doesn't even have a band of musicians to accompany it. The palanquin came to a stop in front of the side gate of the Lord's mansion, a gate that remained closed year-round. There were no deafening firecrackers, no wedding guests to welcome the bride, only a grim-faced old matron who casually pushed the weathered wooden gate open just a crack. It was a long time before Meng Heshu emerged from the door. He wasn't wearing the bright red wedding robes. Instead, he had simply thrown on a dark crimson everyday outfit. His hair was tied back casually, and his eyes were a bluish-black hue, a mixture of debauchery and decadence. In that state, where was even a trace of the lofty arrogance of his former self, the man who once prided himself on his charm and regarded fame and fortune as worthless? He stood stiffly before the palanquin, skipping even the customary kick to the door, and coldly pulled back the curtain. Shui Shiwei must have sensed the chill in the air around her. With a wedding veil adorned with a design of mandarin ducks playing in the water draped over her head, her body trembled uncontrollably in the autumn breeze. She stretched out her hands, adorned with gold and jade bracelets, in an attempt to grasp Meng Heshu's hand, but Meng Heshu acted as if he hadn't noticed, delaying in offering her the red silk sash. Just as the suffocating standoff reached its peak, a deafening clang of gongs suddenly rang out from the main street beyond the high wall. "Good news! Good news," the announcement caller's high-pitched, shrill voice cut through the morning mist and echoed directly into the lifeless, dark alley. "Congratulations to Su Jishou, the eldest son of the Su family, for ranking 8th on the top list. The master and mistress are overjoyed." The sound of the gong was like a death-dealing clap of thunder, sending a shudder through Meng Heshu's body. Su Jishou, that young man from a humble background whom he had suppressed at every turn in his past life, and whose writing he had repeatedly mocked at poetry gatherings as being too contrived, had now taken the spot left vacant by Meng Heshu and made it onto the list in one fell swoop. "Honeysuckle, go." I set down the hand warmer I was holding, my voice as calm as a still lake. Holding an exquisitely crafted rosewood box, Rindong stepped steadily down from the carriage and walked straight to the side gate. Ignoring the wary glances of the Earl's servants, she bowed respectfully to Meng Heshu, whose face was ashen, and Shui Shiwei, who stood frozen in place. "This servant offers her congratulations to the second young master and the second young lady." Rending's clear, ringing voice sounded particularly jarring in this quiet alley. "My young mistress said that today brings double joy. It is both the auspicious day of the second young lady's wedding and the auspicious time for the announcement of the imperial examination results." Fearing that the second young master might miss the festivities outside, the eldest young lady specifically ordered me to go to the entrance of the examination hall and make a rubbing of the freshly released list of successful candidates, as a wedding gift to add to the bride's trousseau. "May the two of you..." Huangding paused briefly, then a cold, deeply mocking smile curled at the corners of her mouth. "I wish you both, just like the honors on this list, to get exactly what you're looking for." With that, she opened the box. Inside, there was no gold, silver, or jade, only a rubbing of a red notice that gave off a strong scent of ink, and a pair of wooden carvings of wild ducks, the cheapest kind found in folk art, not worth even a few coins. Nothing is more devastating than this. Meng Heshu stared intently at the golden list covered with the names of his classmates, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He whipped his head around to look at Shui Shiwei, who was still trembling beneath her red bridal veil. In his gaze, there was no longer a trace of the deep, tender affection for which he would have given his life. All that remained was a chilling mix of venom and loathing. Although Shui Shiwei couldn't see, she clearly sensed that suffocating malice. In a panic, she tore off her wedding veil and locked eyes with Meng Heshu's venomous gaze. She was so terrified that her legs gave way, and she nearly fell at the threshold. "Second young master, the auspicious hour has passed. The lady has given orders, do not let outsiders make a spectacle of themselves in the back alley." The elderly matron of the Bo household snorted derisively and, without further ado, yanked Shui Shiwei over the threshold. I stopped watching the estranged couple as they came to blows in the long alley. Just as I was about to tell the coachman to turn the horse around and head back to the mansion, I heard a piercing scream suddenly come from inside the side gate, which was about to close. The scream was so piercing it nearly went off-key, cutting through the heavy lacquered wooden door and sending a chilling echo rippling through the narrow, chilly alleyway in late autumn. My hand, resting on the xiangfei bamboo curtain, paused slightly, and I did not rush to urge the coachman to leave. Through the crack in the door that had not yet closed completely, I watched coldly as the tragedy inside had just begun to unfold. Shui Shiwei slumped onto the blue stone slab, her hair in disarray, her dark red wedding gown caked in mud and water. Meng Hishu, who just moments ago had stood as still as a wooden post, now resembled an enraged beast as he gripped her collar tightly, the veins on the backs of his hands bulging. He raised his hand and, without a shred of mercy, delivered a hard slap to Shui Shiwei's delicate, alluring face, the very feature she took such pride in. "You wretch! It's all your fault, you jinx. If you hadn't been acting like a seductress and flirting with me all day long, how could I have failed the imperial exams? Now Su Jizhou's name is on the list of successful candidates, while I've become the laughingstock of the entire capital. You'll pay for ruining my bright future." Meng Hishu's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like a man possessed. He struck Shui Shiwei with all his might, causing blood to trickle from the corner of her mouth. She collapsed to the ground and couldn't get back up for a long time. She clutched her severely swollen cheek, her eyes filled with shattered terror and disbelief. She simply could not fathom why the lover who had claimed he would defy his elders and forsake his career for her, once the veil of romantic illusion had been torn away, turned out to be such a hideous, violent thug. The matron of the Bo household, standing nearby, didn't even lift an eyelid. She watched coldly for a moment as if watching a play before speaking slowly and deliberately, "Second young master, be careful not to hurt your hand. The lady has said that since the second young madam has entered this household, she must understand the rules of the Bo manor. On her very first day as a new bride, she should go to the ancestral hall, kneel, and copy the admonitions for women 100 times, as an act of atonement to our ancestors for the seductive, illumined influences she has brought upon herself. Drag her to the ancestral hall. Don't let her sully my eyes here." Meng Hishu shook her off in disgust, as if even the slightest touch might infect him with a plague, and turned away without a second glance, flinging his sleeves as he walked off. Several burly old women immediately stepped forward and, as if dragging a tattered sack, hauled Shui Shiwei, who was still crying and begging for mercy, deep into the dim inner courtyard. Squeak! Bang! The weathered side door was finally slammed shut by a servant of the Bo household and locked. The dull thud completely sealed Shui Shiwei's desperate sobs within the high walls. "Let's go back to the mansion," I said calmly, lowering the bamboo curtain and clutching the hand warmer to my chest. The carriage rolled smoothly out of the dark alley, leaving that squalid place far behind. When they returned to the minister's residence, the proceedings in the main hall were just as crisp and efficient. Father sat upright in his armchair, refusing to offer even a sip of tea to concubine Lu, who was kneeling at his feet. The steward who had accompanied Shui Shiwei on her wedding procession had already reported every detail of her tragic wedding in full. To a minister of the imperial secretariat who had cut his teeth in the political arena, a concubine's daughter, one who had become a useless pawn and had even nearly brought disgrace upon the family, was not worthy of even a shred of his mercy. "Master! Ware has called you father for over a decade, you can't just stand by and watch her suffer such humiliation at the mansion." Concubine Lu wept bitterly, trying to grab her father's hem, but was held down firmly by a maid standing nearby. My father looked down at her from above, his eyes filled with icy contempt. "Humiliation? She chose this path herself. Even if she has to crawl on her knees, she must walk the entire length of the Lord's estate for me. As for you," my father's voice suddenly grew heavy, "you have failed to raise your daughter properly and harbor a wicked heart. If you hadn't indulged her all this time, allowing her to harbor those unfounded delusions, how could this calamity have befallen us today? Guards, take concubine Lu to Hanshui Manor outside the city for convalescence. Without my pass, no one is to visit her." Concubine Lu's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the ground, whereupon she was propped up and dragged out of the main hall by the maidservants. This deep-seated problem within the inner quarters, which had plagued the family for 2 generations, was finally, today, completely eradicated by my own hand, using Meng Hishu's own hand as my tool. The days flowed by quietly, like water. During those days when heavy snow had the capital city in a stranglehold, the city gained yet another topic of conversation over tea and meals. It was said that the second son of the Marquis of Jing'an had completely given up on himself, spending his days in the red light district and racking up a massive gambling debt. Unwilling to punish her own son, the Marquise shifted the blame for this mess entirely onto the newly arrived second young madam. Shui Shiwei had no dowry from the minister's household to fall back on, and having been cut off from her birth family, she lived in the Marquis' mansion in conditions worse than even a respectable senior maidservant. On the winter solstice, she spoke back to Meng Hishu's new favorite concubine over a trivial matter. Meng Hishu kicked her in the pit of her stomach, forcing her to kneel in the freezing snow all night long. It is said that this left her with a severe, chronic illness, making it nearly impossible for her to bear children in the future. I was sitting by the stove, going over the household accounts for the 12th lunar month, when I heard Rindong report these matters. The charcoal fire crackled as it burned, warming my hands. "Let her be," I said, dipping my brush in cinnabar and making a firm mark in the ledger. "Each person must bear their own karma. From now on, there is no need to report any matters concerning the Marquis's estate to the Shuanghua courtyard." "Yes, miss," said Rindong with a smile as she replaced my cup with a fresh one of hot tea, her eyes and brows radiating joy. "When Master returned from court yesterday and went to pay his respects to grandmother, he let the news slip. He said that Grand Secretary Lin of the Cabinet has taken a liking to the family values of our minister's household and wishes to ask for your hand in marriage for his eldest grandson, who has just passed the examination to become a junior scholar. The Lin family is a centuries-old, upright and honorable lineage, and their eldest grandson is renowned as a proper and upright gentleman, nothing like the Meng family's haughty and arrogant ways." I picked up my teacup and gently parted the rising white mist. Through the half-open lattice window, I saw the old plum tree in the courtyard. After enduring a whole winter of bitter cold and snow, it had finally sprouted a few bright red buds on its branches. That hopeless wall from my past life, which had confined me for an entire lifetime, had long since crumbled with a thunderous crash in this silent battle. I did not rely on any salvation that fell from the heavens. Instead, with clarity and restraint, I turned their own strength against them and, with my own hands, pushed those who sought to drag me into the abyss toward the irredeemable ruin they had chosen for themselves. This long, chilly late winter has finally come to an end. When I open the door, a bright and vast spring will be waiting for me. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.